I wish to state that I am not, in fact, late. Please do not accuse me of such a thing, alright? I'm not allowed to do that. I am perfectly on time. I am exactly at the time that I intended to be, in all cases. Yep, my VPN is off. Stream health is good. No, I will get my slipper, young lady. I will. And I will make your two boyfriends watch, okay? Let's not get serious here. Let's not get serious. Oh dear, dear, dear. What is Nexus? Magdalena's Rex, have you not been around for some time? Nexus is literally the biggest thing that's going on right now in the VTuber sphere. Well, it's not really the biggest thing, but it is the biggest, like, disaster kind of thing. It should be very interesting to see what is happening about all this Nexus silliness stuff. Why is everybody talking about Helldivers in VTuber discussions? Seriously. Well, it's going to be an interesting night. I have far too many damn things to talk about tonight. I've got this FTC net neutrality thing. I've got some Colombia protest stuff to cover. I've got some anti-Semitism to discuss. Let's not do that one tonight. There's also some stuff about Denna's wonderful home of Canada, because it's inequalities, because, you know, that just makes complete and total sense, doesn't it? Canada definitely needs to limit people's stuff. If it's not HoloLive and not Phase Connect outside my world, you, sir, have a very limited view of the VTuber world. Like, Nexus is... good grief. I think that we'll probably get into the Nexus stuff first of all, because it's quite entertaining, at least to me personally. How are we doing? Yes, we're doing good. Excellent. Who else is around? It all seems to be correct in the world. Sorry, I'm just going to put this down because I've been fiddling with it and I'm a fool. How is my bitrate going? It says that I'm dropping a few frames, but also that I'm streaming at over 15,000 kilobytes per second at the moment, which is okay. I quite enjoy those numbers. We'll see. But I won't beat around the bush for too long. I think I will just get straight into what I was going to start talking about tonight, because this is supposed to be a news night after all. In particular, I feel like highlighting the lovely Harry of Nexus's attitudes, because this I find particularly amusing. Because when you're the CEO of a major, well, not major, but AniLive is aiming to definitely be a competitor with the big people out in the world. It's aiming to be at least on par with HoloLive or Nijisanji with its own stuff. And yet, Harry just seems to have this dreadful inability to actually deal with any form of criticism whatsoever. And Banned VTuber Memes pointed this out right here, where he said, aside from the CEO answering criticism like a teenager, I don't see how this massive investment is sustainable over time by just isolating it into a proprietary app right from the start. Because I would say that the largest majority of people actually saw the AniLive app on Restream, because at least one person, possibly two or three, were restreaming it from the AniLive app onto Twitch. And those views are not going to go to AniLive. In fact, it might even be a good thing that AniLive was not subjected to the massive stress test that thousands of users would have put it under, because during the streams that people were running on AniLive, pardon me, the chat was bugging out for one thing, and AniLive's tech support's response to the chat on their official service bugging out was turn the application off and then turn it back on again so the chat will refresh. Which is probably one of the stupidest things you can possibly say as a technician to somebody who is trying to help you to beta test your application. Oh, an essential feature isn't working, but that's perfectly fine. All you need to do is turn the application off and then turn it back on again. on a mobile device where it's probably going to load for like 5 or 10 seconds, unless you're on a latest generation iPhone device. And if it's an older iPhone device, just forget about it. Just forget about having any kind of nice thing. Help, my two favorite male streamers are going at the same time. I'm going to assume that I'm one of those favorites, Mama Oko, in which case that's nice. Who is the other one? I'm curious. What is my competition? I demand to know. And what I find most hilarious is that Harry here, as Harlequin, says, it looks like the CEO likely got yelled at and is now using ChatGPT to say sorry. Because as you can see, I think I can actually open the tweets themselves. Yes. That this is just a copy-paste of an apology, of a template apology. Hi Higgslock, please allow me to apologize for what I just said here, although what we are trying is different from other agencies. Our goal is, and always will be, to help our talents be successful. I just didn't want any negative impressions of our talents. And yes, the same template. It's hi user, please allow me to apologize. He's just either copy-pasting this that some intern wrote him, or he's literally using ChatGPT to formulate an apology. And judging by how overly wordy this apology is, I think that's the more likely thing, which is just such an amazing look for all of this. In fact, has Harry actually said anything interesting right now? Like NEXAS. Let's have a look at these comments. 27 debuts across 3 days is on an obscure proprietary app that requires you to sign in for it by filling out a Google Doc form. I've seen much better business plans fail horribly. This is one of the first replies. That's got 39,000 views. 27 debuts on an Apple-only app. Not only are you making your talents compete for their debut, but you're cutting out a majority of viewers. Even people who do have Apple will be skeptical about downloading an unknown app to watch a debut for people they don't know. And again, okay, so I don't see this going well. I like checking out the debuts of new VTubers, but the hurdle to download the app makes me question if I want to or not. And then here we go, AnyLive CEO. This guy used to work for... Yeah, he used to work for Prism Project as well. So this man, Captain, or Cap039 as he's called on Twitter, now has 2 failed VTuber agencies under his belt. I mean, it's not fair to say that AnyLive is a failure already, but when your entire... Yep. And somebody's atting VTuber Historian and Parent 4chan. The app is not available on Android. VTuber Battle Royale, but make it an agency. This is doomed to failure. Too bad I only have an Android. Like, a good 90% of all of these comments are negative. So a previously unknown corporation is debuting 27 VTubers at once on a proprietary app currently available only on iOS that requires a Google Doc to even get the app. Best of luck to the talents, but this just sounds comically bad. Yeah. And then, of course, actually, this is... I didn't realize that Harlequin posted this on the official announcement, too. So 90% or more of all the commentary on this official announcement from Nexus Live is negative. So does the app come with a crypto miner? My thoughts go out to the VTubers here. Why does your form to sign up for the app ask how often you give money to streamers? What does that have to do with our ability to test the app for willingness to watch debuts? Oh my goodness, I didn't even realize that this was the stuff on the Google Doc. That's hilarious. How brain dead and how clueless is this? You and Kuri are both streaming right now. I remember when this man joked with the Death Note and when it came to his critics. What do you mean by that? Are you saying that Harry actually said that his critics should die in a Death Note or something? That can't be true. You're not serious there. Please tell me you're pulling my leg. Where was it now? Yeah, I've already read that, so I can get that out of the way. And I also wanted to highlight this as well with the Seren Space Assassin. because this person is it yeah, I'm guessing it's a female because no pronouns in bio at the very least. Does look like a female avatar. You can never be too sure these days. I want to give my 2 cents on this as someone just passed the first wave of recent auditions and dropped out. I know some Nexus members are following, and I love you. I truly wish you the best of luck, and I'll try my best to support your debuts. That being said, some things that set off my red flag radar. You are required to stream 5 days a week, 2 hours each time. The CEO straight up says that if you live a lifestyle that doesn't allow this, you shouldn't join. Now, I find this interesting because when the declaration started that Nexus would demand you to stream 5 days a week, 2 hours each time, a lot of people were saying, wait, no, that's actually not too bad. That's like 10 hours each week. You can do like 2 5-hour streams in a week and you'd manage that. No, they are specifically wanting you to stream 2 hours each day. Not like 2 5-hour slots or 3 3-hour slots or anything like that. No, they want you streaming for 2 hours every single day of the week. It really rubs me off the wrong way to force your initial wave of talents to invest this much time and energy for an agency and a platform that has no reputation yet. And this is one of the massive killers as well. No personalized management. Harry took the greatest lesson that he possibly could from Niji Sanji. It's that he looked at Niji Sanji because Harry has experience with Niji Sanji as well. And Harry went, you know what? I could go the Hololive route, but look at Niji Sanji. Niji Sanji is absolutely, definitely succeeding at the moment and is a perfect service with no flaws whatsoever. And they don't have personalized management, or at the very least they have so little personalized management that it barely matters. So why don't I just have no management whatsoever? Individual talents don't get managers or advice. Instead, Nexus works as a school where a group of people get educated all at once on the basis of content creation. At that point, I see no reason for established content creators to join. New ones, sure, but once again we go back to the first point, which is why force new VTubers to invest this much time? You are encouraged to stream off of AniLive app to garner a larger audience. So on top of streaming 5 days, 40 hours on the required app, you now have to spend more time and effort promoting yourself on other platforms because they are aware it's the best way to garner an audience. It's an obvious red flag, being that Nexus plans on debuting 100 talents. And this was what I think was a bit of a game changer for me, because there had already been jokes about Nexus. Because Nexus, when the website came out, I'm not sure if they have fixed it, but when Nexus first came out, the wording on Nexus's website was very obscure. It talked going on. This is actually a hilariously timed situation because Cover just firmly overtook Any Color as the market leader as of the previous quarter. I know. 5 times a week for 2 hours isn't bad if you have no life commitments. Yeah. Magdalena's Rex. I just feel the saturation point of Western VTubing has peaked, and even new generations, let alone new corpos, will never be as profitable as 2020 to 2021. Advent's great, but still less percent than myth/promise. Also, Proctor, do you think this app will die before hitting Android or after? I don't really know an awful lot about mobile or web development, but I am fairly certain that the demands between iOS and Android are very different, so it may well be the case that it just, if they kind of stumble out the gate, as I think they genuinely already are stumbling, then it might never make it over to Android. And it's going to be a case of, it's like a multiplayer game where nobody plays because there's nobody else to play with. And so anybody who logs in is like, oh, there's nothing going on, and then immediately logs out. And so it's a death spiral. I think that if AniLive doesn't make a quick investment or make a quick buck, then it's just not going to have the ability to push out into different markets, which in turn is going to hurt it in the long run and the short run, really. So it's very much a potential death spiral that I see, and frankly, I really hope that it happens sooner rather than later. I think the worst case scenario for all of this would be if AniLive kind of limps along for like 6 to 12 months or more, and we don't actually get any real proper closure with things. Like, talents will just start dropping out here and there. We'll see some burnout stories. I think that would be unpleasant. I think that would be possibly the worst way to do things. I think it would be better, honestly, if there was just a clean break. If Annie Live just got up and said, sorry, we can't do this. We overestimated. They do some nonsense PR speak about not meeting expectations. They're so sorry, and they just close down. I think that would be more humane than forcing it to crawl along as a zombie company. There was something else that I wanted to bring up. Oh, what was it? I can't quite remember, which is really irritating. That's very annoying. That's very annoying. Oh, well, I've got tons more to talk about without really... Why am I getting pinged already? Android is going to be like summer to fall. Quite a while, probably. It's not here, by the way. Denna, why exactly are you pinging me in my own Discord as opposed to just talking in my stream chat? That's... Why do people do that? People ping me on the Discord to talk to me about things that I'm talking about on stream. And I'm just like, could you maybe possibly just, you know, use my stream chat where I'm much more likely to notice you? Oh, I don't know. Where is it? Where did I stop? If this ain't a battle royale, may the best VTuber rise to the top type shit, I don't know what it is, which is a very accurate summation. I think that, in fact, that would actually make it worse. Like, Harry's scheme seems to be to throw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall and just hope that the new Picora or the new Selene just rises out of the carnage and makes him money. And to be frank, if... she said, don't worry about it, Dad. What is going on? What is going on? I don't even know any longer. I don't know. But this would be my best estimate as to what Harry is trying to do. He's trying to make talent rise from the ashes. He's basically just putting out as many people as possible in the hopes that one or two will be Picora or Selene tier successful. And then he's just going to try and ride his way to the bank on the backs of those people. And I don't think we have any kind of indication as to, can you actually pay money? I assume you can tip and send money via AnyLive and so on already. If you physically can't send money to the talents via the AnyLive app, then I'd say, good grief, get out of there as fast as possible. That would be terrible. But even if you can, is there a talk about how much cut there is? Because I do not recall ever seeing anywhere on their website which talks about a talent slash company revenue split. I will say the idea of a proprietary app would not be so terrible because on the basis of monetary reward, because when you stream on YouTube or Twitch as under a company banner, the revenue is split three ways. It's not just the company and the VTuber getting the money. YouTube or Twitch also takes their cut. I heard no on sending through the app, but I'd dig more. Are you joking? That would be absurd to me. Like, the main reason that I could argue for there being a proprietary app, from what I've seen, you buy tokens and then donate the tokens. It's like Twitch bits. All right. That does, I suppose, make a reasonable amount of sense. I will give them that. I don't use the Twitch bit system because it gives less of a cut to the streamer than just donating via Stream Elements. Oh, sorry. I just got something stuck on the edge of my mouth. Ow! But, yeah, that's not a terrible system. If I couldn't use Stream Elements, I would use Twitch Bits over Super Chats, because I think the Twitch Bits actually do, although they still take a cut, it's a more favorable cut to the streamer than YouTube Super Chats, whereas, of course, Stream Elements, something like 98% of it goes straight to the streamer. I saw people sent gifts, but people were also given tokens for joining. Ugh. That is so backwards. I really hope that... I really hope this company has public financials at some point so that we can actually see where the hell they've been spending their money. Was there anything else on this topic? No, there was not. There was a rather... I'll get this out of the way too. This was something that popped up on my Twitter feed a few days ago, and you'll see why. This is Tara Bull. And this caught my attention. Enhanced photo. Police are looking for this man. Will keep updating. And I was like, why the hell is this on my Twitter feed? And so I scrolled down a little bit further. This has got 20 million views, by the way. And this is the video that was shown. Is there actually audio? There is audio. Okay. And you'll see why. Just one second. Let's make sure my audio is on. Yes, it is. No, YouTube takes a smaller cut than Twitch bits. Twitch takes 50%. YouTube only takes 30%. Okay, then I was wrong about that. My resolve to not use Twitch bits has been redoubled then. But yeah, let's look at this wonderful video.
What's all this about?
One of the sort of favourites, one of the targets. And some players don't cope for being a target.
Yeah, let's look at that just again, just in slow-mo. Just in case you didn't get it. I mean, it's not quite caught in 4K, but do I really need to say much more on this thing? But apparently this woman has actually been told to... Did she... Yeah, here it is. Well done, everyone. Keep sharing until he is found. A creepy man has been recorded bizarrely grinning and wobbling his head after nibbling on a boy's ear at the World Snooker Championship. South Yorkshire police have confirmed that they are reviewing the footage after it went viral online and have raked in more than 22 million views by Saturday morning. Yes, she says, several people are telling me I have to delete my pinned post. It's not happening. And I would agree, because this is the kind of behavior that I think merits investigation on an immediate basis. And it was very worrying to me that this occurred in Britain too. It said South Yorkshire. And Britain at the moment does not have the best reputation for properly punishing those who abuse children, shall we say. Although I will say, this person who committed that particular offense is not white. Well, he is white, rather. He is white. So he's not going to have the same kind of protections that the more brown individuals who did certain things in various small British towns to children. He won't have those protections, fortunately. Well, I say fortunately, like the law should apply universally. But I thought that was an interesting thing that popped up on my Twitter feed. And I will now switch over. There's been something that I'm absolutely dying to talk about, but I will talk about this FCC thing first. Because net neutrality has been dead for quite some time. It was revoked, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago by now, maybe even a little bit more. And net neutrality is basically the thing that enables websites to host content that may be potentially illegal without being liable for it. So basically, if I go on a forum and I say the N-word, then the owner of that forum cannot be prosecuted for me going on their forum and saying the N-word, and saying they cannot be told you're hosting hate speech, because the digital safe harbor, net neutrality, etc. says that, the platform is not responsible for the actions of the individuals who use it, especially if those platforms take reasonable precautions to prevent it from happening and have clear rules denying it from happening. But a couple of years ago, this was revoked and this was removed, and the whole progressive elite were like, oh no, it doesn't really change anything, right before massive waves of demonetization and aggressive censorship was rolled out across the net. But we can thank the FCC, because the FCC is restoring net neutrality rules that ban blocking and throttling in a 3-2 vote. The Federal Communications Commission voted 3-2 to impose net neutrality rules today, restoring the common carrier regulatory framework enforced during the Obama era and then abandoned while Trump was president. The rules prohibit internet service providers from blocking and throttling lawful content and ban paid prioritization. Cable and telecom companies plan to fight the rules in court, but they lost a similar battle during the Obama era when judges upheld the FCC's ability to regulate ISPs as common carriers under Title II of the Communications Act. Consumers have made clear to us they do not want their broadband provider cutting sweetheart deals with fast lanes for some services and slow lanes for others. FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosen-Warsell, good grief, that's a hell of a second name, said at today's meeting. They do not want their providers engaging in blocking, throttling, and paid prioritization. And if they have problems, they expect the nation's expert authority on communications to be able to respond. Because we put national net neutrality rules back on the books, we fix that today. ISPs insist the rules aren't necessary because they already follow net neutrality principles, yet also claim the rules are so burdensome that they will be prevented from investing more in their networks. Oh, just think of the tier 1 ISPs. Just think of the poor giant corporations, guys. Net neutrality is just that ISPs can't bias traffic that goes through their wires. The safe harbor positions is separate from that. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry. I did confuse the two. You are quite correct. But this is something that Kiwi Farms has had to deal with for a very long time. This has been one of Null's pet bugbears because for a long time now, various different tier 1 ISPs, aka ISPs that are the literal backbone of the entire internet, have been throttling or banning IP connections to Kiwi Farms in an attempt to black hole the website. And people have had to take various different actions to bypass that themselves, but it's also very much limited a lot of the site's traffic. And Null has been completely livid about this because it is just completely illegal because his website is legal in the USA. Meanwhile, ISPs refuse to black hole and throttle various websites that are very well known for distributing child CSM and various other materials. So it is just a complete and obvious case of double standards. But I thought this article was quite funny, because, of course, you have the lobby group whining and wailing about it. Net neutrality is net fatality. Cable lobby group NCTA, the Internet and Television Association, claimed that the FCC's marketplace intrusion comes at the worst possible time for our massive national effort to finally close the digital divide, just as billions in federal funding are dedicated to extending network access to America's underserved communities. That is a reference to a $42 billion program that is paying ISPs to deploy networks in unserved and underserved areas. Instead of clearing obstacles to speed broadband deployment where it is most needed, this ill-timed and unlawful order threatens to hinder progress, NCTA CEO Michael Powell said. This will not deliver net neutrality. It will risk a net fatality. Because, there's no penalties whatsoever for a CEO just blatantly lying in testimony or anything like that. Apologies, I'm just driving out a bottle of water. The court battle against the FCC will center on whether the Commission can define broadband as a telecommunications service, a necessary step for imposing Title II common carrier regulations. ISPs hope that the Supreme Court's evolving approach to major questions will prevent the FCC from defining broadband as telecommunications without explicit instructions from Congress. In other words, they want to be able to bribe as many people as possible on Congress to tell the FCC what to do, instead of the FCC acting on objective information. The cathedral uses CSM as a control mechanism. They want people to live under a sort of Damocles. They want it banned but accessible. I tragically would agree with you wholeheartedly on that. FCC Commissioner Jeffrey Starks, a Democrat, said that major questions review is reserved for only extraordinary close cases, and this one doesn't come close. There's no unheralded power that we're purporting to discover in the annals of an old dusty statute. We've been classifying communication services one way or the other for decades, and the 1996 Act expressly codified our ability to continue that practice. FCC Republican. FCC Republicans blasted the Democrat majority today. The internet in America has thrived in the absence of 1930s command and control regulations by the government, Commissioner Brendan Carr said. He is completely correct. Carr, who spoke for more than half an hour, described how the FCC's net neutrality decisions were allegedly swayed by President Obama in 2015 and by President Biden this year. The FCC has never been able to come up with a credible reason or policy rationale for Title II. It is all just shifting sands, and that is because the agency is doing what it's been told to do by the executive branch, Carr said. Carr also blamed judges for giving the FCC too much power. He expressed hope that the current Supreme Court will ensure that only Congress can decide whether Title II is applied to broadband. Congress never passed a law saying the internet should be heavily regulated like a utility, nor did it pass one giving the FCC the authority to make that determination. The executive branch pressured the agency into claiming a power that remained and remains with the legislative branch, Carr said. And this is just a whole pile of weasel words. Because up here, it's like I said, he's correct, is that the internet has thrived in the absence of command and control regulations by the government. But the thing is, this is not command and control regulations. This is actually the exact opposite. It is preventing broadband companies from playing favorites. The FCC shouldn't exist in the first place. Roosevelt created it to censor the media who kept criticizing him for being a dictator. I mean, that's true, but in this case, the internet should be the equivalent of water or power at this point. It should be considered an essential aspect of life. Nobody should be censored for using the internet. There should be absolutely no case whatsoever where a ISP decides, we will support this site, but not that site. Every single person should have equal access to the well. It's the one form of equality that I will wholeheartedly stand behind. Everybody should be allowed on the internet. Everybody should be allowed to use these same resources. It is up to the individual user to curate their own experience. No government and no private entity should be able to do so. And this is why I hate these weasel words, is that he's saying, oh, this is dreadful and awful. It's the government imposing power on the internet. I agree that treating ISPs as a utility is something I agree with. Good. I'm glad we're on the same page there. That I am perfectly okay with any so-called regulation that prevents ISPs. Because the thing about ISPs is that they are already a monopoly. The internet is equivalent to not even water/electricity. It's like roads, highways, blocking that is dangerous. I quite agree with you, Magdalena's Rex. That is an enlightened take, I would say. Strict enforcement urged. In the weeks before the vote, some consumer advocates criticized what they see as a loophole in the rules that would let ISPs give faster speeds to certain types of applications as long as application providers don't have to pay for special treatment. They say the FCC should explicitly prohibit ISPs from speeding up applications instead of only enforcing a no-throttling rule that forbids slowing applications down. Others say that the rules are just as strong as those enforced during the Obama era. That, I think, is not too bad of a point. It should go both ways, because I can definitely see ISPs just deciding to allocate more resources, and by doing so, decreasing the amount of resources available to other applications as a way of getting around this rule. There's not too much left. Aside from that disagreement, consumer advocates overwhelmingly praised the FCC action. John Bergermeyer, legal director at advocacy group Public Knowledge, urged the FCC to enforce the rules strictly. Broadband providers will continue attempting to rebrand their old plans for internet fast and slow lanes, hoping to sneak them through. I agree. The FCC will need to diligently enforce its rules, including clarifying that discrimination in favor of certain apps or categories of traffic impairs and degrades traffic that is left in the slow lane, and that broadband providers cannot simply take apps that people use on the internet every day and package them as a separate non-broadband service. The FCC must ensure that practices that are not expressly prohibited but still unreasonably interfere with the ability of end users to freely use the internet or of edge providers to freely compete are disallowed. These practices include discriminatory zero rating and network interconnection practices. I agree with all of this. This is a very sensible statement. The FCC today said that reinstating Title II will also give it authority to revoke the authorizations of foreign-owned entities who pose a threat to national security to operate broadband networks in the US. The FCC said it could previously target phone providers with such actions, but not broadband providers. Now this, I will admit, is a slightly worrying sentence. To revoke the authorizations of foreign-owned entities. What does that mean exactly? This this doesn't really sit all that well with me because it strikes me as a branch that could grow into a nasty tree of censorship of foreign powers, basically, which I don't agree with either. The internet should be open for everybody. Everybody should be allowed to say whatever the hell they like on it. And it should be up to the user to be intelligent enough to curate their own material. So this part, I will admit, it looks a little bit suspicious. The Commission has previously exercised its authority under Section 214 of the Communications Act to revoke the operating authorities of four Chinese state-owned carriers to provide voice services to the US, the FCC said. Any provider without Section 214 authorization for voice services must now also cease any fixed or mobile broadband service operations in the United States. Again, this doesn't strike me as all that positive. Let me look at the comments for a second and see if anybody has comments on it. Obama shouldn't get too much praise for internet freedom. Him giving away ICANN to a non-profit means it's no longer subject to the First Amendment. Okay. Also, ISPs only care about stakeholders and aren't beholden to their theoretical customers anymore. They are perfectly willing to cock-block sites like KF, which is bad because only they can provide the internet. Yes, I absolutely agree. You've got it in one, Magdalenus Rex. Now, but as I was saying, down here, I disagree with this. I think that the trouble is, on the one hand, I actually don't mind the idea of a nation having its own capital or small I internet where it's reserved for its own citizens, so long as it doesn't compete with the idea of a global capital I internet. I dislike it when countries make the arbitrary decision to block access to any kind of website or material that is hosted by another country. I do kind of support the idea that I'm not against the idea of making sure that a foreign company does not have undue levels of influence from a monetary perspective on a US-based, on a company that is based in your own home. Like, for example, if you're allowing large amounts of foreign capital to be invested in your own, bad about your government, and it's obviously a liability. I mean, just look at what happened to Germany and other countries who are dependent on Russian gas. Again, it's not something that I necessarily morally agree with, but I also think that from a pragmatic perspective, I can at least understand why you would want to do that. But it's a power that I would be incredibly and constantly suspicious of, and I think should be eternally transparent in all cases. That's more or less what I wanted to talk about regarding the FCC. There's a couple of other things that I definitely want to cover, and let me just find the tab here. This was the one that I really wanted to get to. This, how woke hierarchy created an upper-class underclass. I talk about culture war nonsense a fair amount by now, and I found that I'm scrolled in properly. So that everybody can see. Come on, get a bit closer. There we go, that works. That's about big enough. It was an uprising of retards. That's what they called themselves, anyway. When followers of the Reddit forum r/Wall Street Bets organized en masse to buy shares of the video game chain store GameStop, they did so in the self-deprecating spirit of very online weirdos. Since digital downloads had taken over the gaming market, billionaire hedge funders had shorted GameStop, meaning they'd bet on its brick-and-mortar model to fail. The company's sudden windfall caused such panic among the good and the great men that the ensuing furore ended in a congressional hearing. Impressive for a bunch of dorks who gleefully referred to themselves in meme-laden pep talks as apes and autists. In January 2021, this was a marquee event. It generated breathless headlines in real time, a flurry of documentaries a year later, and a minor feature film featuring Pete Davidson the year after that. By now, though, if anything at all about the episode sticks in the memory, it's those labels: ape, autist, retard. They're pointedly crass, of course, but more importantly, they contradict one another. Can an autist also be a retard? The latter is a slur for someone cognitively stunted. He might be charming, but not the sort of person you'd want managing your portfolio. Think Pete Davidson. An autist, though, is exactly the sort of person you'd want managing your portfolio. I can agree. As a slang term rather than a professional diagnosis, autist means someone who thinks in spreadsheets. He might have trouble making eye contact, but he's not dumb by any stretch. He's certainly not an ape, or, worse, Pete Davidson. Sometimes these terms are applied separately to different coalitions within the GameStop alliance, but just as often they were combined to signal an overall group identity, a kind of collective self-perception. These were people who deftly processed reams of complex data in real time, made an end run around the world's best pedigreed analysts, and nevertheless portrayed themselves as lumbering brutes eating chicken nuggets in mom's basement. They thought of themselves as the masses, but they were really kind of elite, and that put them in a very distinct category, one that has steadily gained importance in recent years. Today, a significant number of people with exceptional skills nevertheless feel in some profound sense like unwashed outcasts. In an election year that follows more than a decade of rising populist dissatisfaction, high-skill but low-status rejects are coming to look like a formidable social class. The GameStop story served as an allegory for a general feeling that our most sought-after posts, our most celebrated roles, are occupied by imposters and mediocrities. To some extent, this is the perennial American gripe. As de Tocqueville observed, democratic institutions awaken and foster a passion for equality which they can never entirely satisfy. I really need to read more de Tocqueville. So that even legitimate differences in skill can be a source of grievance. But ultimately, Americans can handle meritocratic distinctions if they appear, well, merited. Increasingly, they don't. The condition is particularly acute in academia. That's one reason why the public humiliation of Harvard President Claudine Gay early this year drove home the same message as the GameStop case, but with great force. The inciting incident for Gay's resignation was her testimony before Congress following the October 7th attacks against Israel, in which she refused to plainly say that the university's protections against genocidal rhetoric applied to Jews. But the more telling revelation from the standpoint of her position as a representative of the ivory tower was that she had lifted large chunks of other people's work and airdropped them into her own papers without attribution. When an authority figure at a once respected university exposed herself not only as a feckless quisling, but a serial plagiarist to boot, it seemed to confirm a generalized impression that positions of high academic rank have become little more than fancy drapery for midwits and frauds. All the more offensive since, as the historian Paul Fussell wrote in 1983's Class, in this country, just about all that's available as a front of honor is the institution of the higher learning. Combine this with the salary advantages that attach to a college degree, and it starts to look like career advancement is conditioned on submission to people and ideas with no right to claim anyone's fealty. The class that philosopher James Burnhall called the managerial elite has become ever more managerial and ever less elite. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, a set of operating principles whose express raison d'etre is to create the illusion that underperformers are overachievers, has ensured that many accolades and advantages do in fact accrue to unimpressive functionaries. That is how you end up with a world in which race huckster Ibram X. Kendi wins a MacArthur Genius Grant, gets appointed to lead an entire Boston University department, then belly flops when asked to satisfy even the mildest research requirements. The emperor is not just naked, he is ugly too. As disgust with courtly decadence boiled over in 18th century France, Edmund Burke conceded that the noblemen of Europe were not without their mental blotches and running sores like the rest of us. But Burke maintained that English peers and royals, at least, still served their countrymen by embodying an elevated sense of the nation's majestic past. Can the same be said of our modern courtiers, the DEI eminences who command the heights of public honor? Rather the opposite. Our chattering classes are devoted almost as an article of faith to the proposition that anti-black racism runs in the very DNA of this country, as journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones put it in her introduction to the feverishly publicized 1619 Project. In 2021, President Biden remarked in a speech that the soul of this nation is afflicted by systemic racism. When that is what the people in charge think of the country and its origins, upper-class arrogance ceases to be offset by aspirational glamour classes think. Henderson could trudge all the way from foster care to the Ivy Leagues, but he would remain an outcast in the halls of power unless he learned to affirm the chic theories that confer status on the upper class at little cost, while often inflicting costs on the lower classes. Rob Henderson is someone who I follow on Twitter, and I consider him a very, very good person. Is your stream cutting and lagging out? Let me just check. It has cut out once or twice according to OBS. Has it happened much? Is it a dramatic thing? Because it's saying now that it's stable again. We'll see how it goes. If I'm able to finish this article and it hasn't worked again, it hasn't stopped again, then I will continue. If not, then I'll probably call it a night then. I'm really annoyed with this. I wish my Starlink was a bit better. I'm not sure why. It seems like Monday and later in the evening, it seems to get better, but I'm not sure whether there's anything that I can do to actually fix that. This is the class divide that now cuts America most deeply. It separates the new gentry, who may or may not be competent or even accomplished, but must display faculty with abstruse terms like cis-heterosexism, from the new masses, whose competency, however exceptional, will not be formally recognized until they speak the language of human resources. When what was supposed to be an egalitarian arrangement morphs into an old-fashioned caste system with all the absurdity and self-regard of the ancien regime, but with none of its charms, you have the makings of a protracted and embittered social conflict. Which is exactly what we have been living through. In 2016, when Donald Trump divided families and erstwhile political allies, the subsequent realignment emphasized and hardened long-standing class divisions. This is part of what people mean when they say that Trump is a populist leader, that he attracts not just the working classes, but also, critically, those aspirants to the upper classes who feel they are not getting the recognition they deserve. In Second Class, a book-length survey of people who feel shut out from American prosperity, Newsweek's Bataya Ungar Sargon, oh, like it's Sargon of Akkad, encounters more than a few people who feel keenly that downward social pressure has kept them from realizing their natural gifts. Cyrus feels cheated out of who he was supposed to be, Ungar Sargon writes of one Medicare bureaucrat in Arizona who would have made a good lawyer. This kind of counterfactual longing is commonplace in cultures with stark class distinctions. Perhaps in this neglected spot is laid some heart once pregnant with celestial fire, wrote the English poet Thomas Gray, looking out in the 18th century over a humble country graveyard. It's cutting in and out for me too. I thought it was on my end because my internet's been garbage for the past couple of days due to weather. It says that I've dropped 152 frames at the moment, which is 1.2%. Keep me updated on that to see if it goes away or it stays a constant thing. I apologize. I don't think there's anything that I can do about it, sadly. Americans have never been comfortable accepting the injustice Gray took for granted, that full many a flower is born to blush unseen, and waste its sweetness on the desert air. There is no getting rid of this unfairness altogether. But the ranks of our dispossessed have swollen to include more and more people who would naturally make their way to the top were it not for the arbitrary purity tests and racial dogmas pressing down on them from above. Increasingly, it's not just obscure farmers or overtaxed truckers who feel cheated out of the respect they've earned. It's also debt-ridden college kids, heterodox tech magnates, and blacklisted intellectuals. It's manual laborers whose wages get depressed by inflation and illegal immigration. But it's also artists whose project gets passed over to make room for yet another adaptation of the color purple. This helps explain why Trump has mobilized young people, blue-collar workers, white evangelicals, law-abiding Hispanics, and black business owners, all in unexpected numbers. These are people who feel, in one way or another, despised without cause. Essentially, this whole article is talking about something that is very close to my heart, the fact that modern society offers nothing to those who are actually working hard, but instead it stomps down on them and it refuses to let them reach any personal level of self-satisfaction. Instead, society is more or less predisposed upon the idea that what you believe in has no real meaning, that your standards should be completely arbitrary and set by the elite, and rather than having any personal aspirations, you should just slavishly follow along with the trends. It's the idea of, consume product, get excited for next product. Where was I? Yes, here we are. Thomas Jefferson once insisted to John Adams that by rendering the law insensitive to hereditary titles, America could allow its natural aristocracy to scale the heights of power and authority. There is always an extent to which this ideal must remain imperfectly realized. Recently, the founding generation's own time-bound failings have been taken as license to indict their whole project as a sham. Yeah, there's a reason why they want to rewrite the Constitution. Defending a successful motion to have Jefferson's statue removed from New York City Hall, one Democrat assemblywoman referred to him as a slave-holding pedophile. Economic Marxism, the kind that sought to organize a revolt of downtrodden workers, failed to carry water in the US for lack of a sufficiently disaffected proletariat. This century, though, new legions of cultural revolutionaries have achieved alarming success by putting their fingers on the national sore spot. The very longing that the founders instilled in us for perfect fairness can be used to shame them for hypocrisy. It's called double standards. But the bitter irony is that in trying to outdo the founders' virtue, we have created an unnatural aristocracy, far more hidebound and unworthy than the old world royalty they fled. Our self-styled betters have neither raised us up towards a more perfect meritocracy, nor led us triumphantly into a classless paradise. They have simply replaced an imperfect class system with a grotesque and nonsensical one. They promised to cater to throngs of frustrated pariahs. Instead, they created more of them, adding to their number daily from the exiles of the natural aristocracy. Whether or not it is desirable that the resulting coalition should once again find itself represented by Donald Trump, a profoundly suboptimal champion, it was inevitable. This presidential contest is shaping up into a face-off between the incompetent elect and the excellent outcasts. It may not be the most exhilarating choice to have to face, but it's not a particularly difficult one either. And that brings us to the end of that article, which I found extremely good. And it depresses me that the way the world is at the moment, a vast amount of people are just never going to read or absorb this kind of thing. And I find it funny that there are people like Rob Henderson, who is an intelligent and learned man. But the fact of the matter is that although I would say he's on the side of the disaffected, he is also the kind of person that will never really get ridden by them. Get read by them, sorry. Get heard out by them. What I've seen is a consistent downward trend in the respect for intellectual integrity, thorough research, and proper principles. And it depresses me. It's actually something that has weighed on my mind a tremendous amount, especially in recent weeks. And it's why I wanted to highlight this next part. Give me just a moment while I navigate around in my tabs. Yes, here. This is another thing that I saw on Twitter, and it's something that I've spoken about quite passionately on Discord, but I thought I would bring it up again in stream. This is Human David Himati. What is it with Americans and their very, very strange names? And he's talking here about the Columbia University protests. And he says, a brave individual infiltrated the group that has taken over Columbia University by pretending to be a supporter. And she sent me these videos and photos from the inside. They have detailed programs and rules. What's an anti-Semitism teaching? And the responses to this, on the one hand, kind of made me happy, and on the other hand, made me very depressed. I'll just let you see some of these. In fact, the one that I want to focus on most of all is this. Actually, I'll show the videos first. Average danger here right there. Let me just go back and turn that up because I didn't quite hear that.
I felt comfortable planning this teach-in because we don't want to center anti-Semitism and Jewish experience because we're just trying to work together for Palestinian liberation.
Let me just listen to that one more time. I apologize.
Just trying to work through Jewish experience because we don't want to center anti-Semitism and Jewish experience because we're just trying to work together for.
We don't want to something around anti-Semitism and Jewish experience. We're just trying to work together. I think she said center. We don't want to center around anti-Semitism and Jewish extremism. I think that's what she said, and I think that would actually gel the most with what was highlighted here. I think I will go in for this one. And this was what really caught my eye. Staying focused, we do not engage with instigators. Why? Their goal is to distract us and others from our movement. In giving them attention, we give them what they want. They will tire, we will not. Our energy and time are best focused on our program demands community solidarity with Palestine. We don't need to, we outnumber them. These guidelines do not pertain to violent instigators. The moderate right of the distance showed their true colors regarding Israel and Christ is King, while the hard right distance have gone deep into Nietzschean postmodern only power matters BS. I'm not going to comment on that too much, but on my Twitter feed recently, there's been an awful lot of examples of what I would say right-wing individuals celebrating the arrests of protesters and demonstrators in numerous campuses across the United States. And I can understand in some cases, because there have been some cases of students engaging in very radical and even somewhat violent protests, which I can understand there being a law and order component that needs to be broken up. A protest should not be allowed to go to the point of violence, in my opinion. There's nothing wrong with breaking up a violent protest if it's obviously, the state is in the right, and there's a question to that, but that's a bit of a rabbit hole that I don't think I'm going to go right into. But what very much upsets me, what is stuck in my brain, which I can't get out of my brain, is the comparison that sprung to mind. Because a year or so ago, and it's about 2 years ago now, there were the Canadian trucker protests. And the Canadian trucker protests were vilified by the left, and they were cheered on by the right. The left did all the usual stuff, saying this is actually violence, this is fascism, this is evil, and they tried to use censorship, they tried to use the police, they tried to use banking and all these other forces to remove the Canadian truckers. And one of the things that they constantly did was there was a number of, if not false flag operations, then maybe trolling operations, or just some legendarily out-of-place idiots. One of the things that I distinctly remember was a case made that the Canadian truckers were Nazis, and the sole basis for accusing their movement of being Nazis was that in a part of, I think, a Canadian city where a protest was taking place. A van was photographed with a Nazi flag flying over it. There was something like 2 kilometers away, or even further away from where the actual Canadian truckers' protests were being held. But that was instantaneously held up as absolute unstoppable proof that the protests were inspired by Nazis, and so everything that was done to remove the protesters was inherently justified. And then I compare the Canadian truckers' protests to the Summer of Love, the BLM protests, when tens of thousands of violent rioters and aggressive people were allowed to run rampant across all of America to destroy, it's burn, loot, murder is the acronym. And there were plenty of perfectly justified cases of people defending themselves. With look at Kyle Rittenhouse and so on. Sorry, I'm going to belch 1 second. Kyle Rittenhouse defended himself against obviously murderous people. I think three of his attackers were confirmed criminals, and 2 of them were sexual abusers. And yet he was called a Nazi and an evil right-wing extremist for daring to defend himself and showing up to defend his neighborhood. The problem that I have is that now the shoe is on the other foot, is that we have large, mostly peaceful, and I would unironically say mostly peaceful, left-wing protests. I have not really seen any major evidence of violence on these university campus protests, and I have tried. I have genuinely tried to look and find examples of these protesters engaging in outright violence towards bystanders, or even engaging in occupying movements. The one thing that I've found consistently is that there have been multiple claims that these university protesters are occupying various parts of campus illegally. And pretty much every case that I have seen of that, I've looked it up, and the places where they've been occupying has been a public space. Columbia especially, people have been saying that the protesters are blocking access and they are occupying the Columbian campus. But the Columbian campus's own website says that these places are fully open spaces. They are public spaces. They are public property, and they are explicitly identifying protesters as people who can use these spaces to express their political beliefs, which is a clear example of the First Amendment, that no crime is being committed by these protesters. And the Supreme Court has been extremely, extremely clear on what constitutes violations of the First Amendment. The Supreme Court has stated unambiguously that even if you were to stand on a street corner and address an angry mob and point at a building and say, "Go and burn down that building right now," you are still protected by the First Amendment if under certain circumstances. For example, if there was no real expectation of the crowd actually acting on those words, you could still make an argument that was your free speech. And I've seen multiple videos of people being arrested on these campus protests by things like masked police officers or aggressive police officers that have used outright force to subdue people, quite often very old people too. There's at least 2 or 3 examples of campus professors being arrested, and they've obviously been in like their 50s and 60s, and they've been being dragged off in handcuffs, or they've been forced to the ground, or otherwise very obviously assaulted. But the upsetting thing is that a whole ton of people are saying, "Oh, this is perfectly justified. What's it feel like now the shoe is on the other foot, you bastards?" Which very much depresses me. And I see an awful lot of people doing this. I'm not talking like random Twitter people. I'm talking about people who frankly should know better. Now, my standard, and you're free to tell me that my standard is wrong, but my standard is you either have free speech or you don't. Either everyone gets the same rights or nobody does. And if you want to say, I'm fine with some people having rights and others not being, and I'm fine with other people not having rights, that is at least a consistent stance. What you can't say is that I feel there should be free speech for all, except the people I don't like, which is an argument I have seen being made many, 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 many times. And I'm frankly completely sick and tired of it. And I highlight the Colombian protests in particular, and this sign, which I've had on screen for several minutes now, because these people are basically the antithesis of Black Lives Matter. If you look at this sign, they are saying very implicitly, do not engage with instigators. Do not harass people. Do not attack people. Do not give instigators any attention. Focus on your own protests, which is exactly the opposite position that the Black Lives Matter protests took, the exact opposite position all of these other protests that have happened throughout the nation that have been left-wing focused. All of those have been provably focused on instigating conflict in order to justify further escalation and political change. But these people are doing none of that. In fact, if this was, I can guarantee you without a shadow of a doubt, if a right-wing protest had signs up like this, people would be saying this right-wing protest is toothless and these people are pussies. They have no backbone, they are not willing to stand on their rights, and they are not willing to defend themselves in times of emergency, and they are allowing the left-wing instigators to walk all over them. Amandis, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that second name. I have absolutely no idea how to pronounce that second name. Even I've had a police officer implicitly threaten to shoot me with a gun in NYC. I mean, it's NYC. It's the center of American totalitarianism, honestly. But it's the double standard that has really stuck in my craw from all of this. And it depresses me because it's October 7th all over again in my mind. And in fact, I'm not going to say much more on this topic, but I am going to highlight somebody who has a lot better things to say about this thing than me. Allow me to just look him up. Here we are. This is a clip from Glenn Greenwald, whose praises I will never stop shouting. It's only 2 minutes, 30 seconds, and I'll put him on while I just have a drink of water. Because I massively respect Glenn Greenwald, because he also conducted a interview with several people who are leaders at the Colombian protests, and they were pointing out things as well that I found very interesting, which I'll talk about after this clip, actually. So let's go with this.
Places of the world have been so obsessed for years with college students and college campuses is not because they are impassioned and genuine free speech activists. That's just the branding, and any lingering doubt about that should have been permanently dispelled since October 7th. Instead, their obsessive focus on colleges is because the pro-Israel movement has understood that the greatest threat to pro-Israel consensus in the United States emanates from college campuses. In particular, their grave fear that the call to boycott and divest from Israel or to sanction it will have the same type of success as enjoyed by the movement of the 1980s on which it was based, activism to force divestment from South Africa as a means of weakening that apartheid regime. The desire to gain control of the range of permissible speech in American academia, and particularly the effort to ban Israel criticisms as anti-Semitic racism, has long been brewing. October 7th was merely the much-awaited accelerant. As a result, one now sees Israel supporters of all types, neocons, Republicans, conservatives, pro-Israel Democrats, foaming at the mouth to weaponize racism accusations and police powers to silence Israel's critics. All of the most tawdry neocon tactics are on full display, including the equating of war critics with being, quote, pro-Hamas, and claiming that all of this has been fused with the embrace by much of the pro-Israel right of all the classic left-rebel theories of censorship over the last decade, namely claiming that protests against Israel's wars have veered into racist hate speech.
I feel that it's worth noting here as well that the Colombia protest in particular is a combined effort between both Jews and Muslims. In fact, I think that a majority of the protesters on the Colombia campus are Jewish, because one of the greatest accomplishments of the Israeli lobby in America is to convince the public and to convince the people at large that all Zionists well, not all Zionists are Jews, but all Jews are Zionists. Whereas that is just provably and obviously not the case. And I'll just continue this.
That words and slogans are themselves violence, and that they make Jewish students feel unsafe and thus must be forcibly silenced.
Again, to re-emphasize, a majority of the protesters on university campuses are Israeli. They are Jewish by birth.
And punished. Never mind that Jewish students themselves compose a non-trivial, often significant segment of these pro-Palestinian protests on virtually every major American campus where they are found.
Thank you, Glenn.
At bottom, this is not a complex question. If the First Amendment's free speech guarantees anything, it protects the right to protest and denounce the American government's decision to finance a foreign country's military and then arm and finance its highly destructive war. And it is precisely that right that is now under sustained and serious assault.
Exactly. He says it as well as I ever could. I just want to go and draw my PNG tuber, but I can't figure out how to do that currently. What do you mean? Do you like not have access to drawing software or anything like that? And, well, this leads us very neatly to where all of this always concludes. Bipartisan bill would create anti-Semitism monitors at colleges. A pro-Israel House Democrat and Republican plan, bipartisan support, to introduce legislation creating federally sanctioned anti-Semitism monitors for select college campuses. Why it matters. It's the first bill introduced in Congress as a direct response to the pro-Palestinian protests that have rocked Columbia University and other colleges in recent days. Driving the news, Reps Richie Torres, DNY, and Mike Lawyer, his name is literally Lawyer, are introducing the College Oversight and Legal Updates Mandating Bias Investigations and Accountability Act, or Columbia Act. That's just good grief. That is a tortured acronym. They really took that acronym out the back and beat that to death. The bill would allow the Department of Education to send a third-party anti-Semitism monitor to any college that receives federal funding, and to revoke that funding for colleges that don't comply. The monitor, paid for by the school, would be charged with releasing a public quarterly report evaluating the progress that a college or university has made towards combating anti-Semitism. The bill was first reported by Jewish Insider. What they're saying: my office and I have spoken with countless Jewish students from campuses across America who feel deeply unsafe, purely as a result of their religious and ethnic identity, Torres said in a statement. Jewish students have told my office that they feel completely abandoned by their university administrators, and they view Congress as the only avenue for accountability and safety. Please save me, Big Daddy Government! Zoom out. The bill's introduction comes as college campuses have become ground zero for a national fight over anti-Semitism and the Israel-Hamas war. At least 10 House members, including Speaker Mike Johnson, have gone to Columbia this week to denounce campus anti-Semitism and criticize the college's administration. Several high-profile House progressives have also gone to colleges in recent days to show their solidarity with demonstrators. Something, find out who you can't criticize. Yes, I would highly recommend Krita as well. I think that Denner can sing Krita's praises in that. Never heard of the Monitor brand anti-Semitism. What resolutions do they have? I'd love a 4K 165Hz anti-Semitism on it. Oh dear. Yeah. And just the outright and shameless lie here, it shows you just how blatantly these things operate. I mean, for one thing, as we just saw Glenn Greenwald point out, a large number of the protesters are themselves ethnically Jewish. They're just not Zionist Jews. And also, when they say, Jewish students have told my office that they feel completely abandoned by university administrators and they feel deeply unsafe. Now, you tell me, how many high-profile cases have there been of Muslim students at US colleges attacking or violently hurting Jewish students? I can't think of any. I can't think of a single Jewish student in the last year since October 7th who has been violently assaulted by a Muslim on an American college campus. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but all I can say is if it did happen, you can tell it would make headline news across the entire nation. I have not seen one instant of that happening. So where are all these Jews that feel deeply unsafe from all of these incredibly violent protests that are just ripping their universities apart, when literally all the footage of violence that I have seen online is of police breaking up protests? It just really, really gets to me. Hasn't stopped them before. Yeah, exactly. You very quickly find out who you're not allowed to talk about. I'm sorry for venting about this, I really am. I know that this isn't the kind of thing that a lot of people tune in to watch me for, but at times, you see, I consider myself to have a very strong sense of justice. I really regard justice and fairness as intensely important things that people should always have access to, no matter where they're from. And I don't have... Didn't that one lady get stabbed in the eye at Yale? I have no idea what you mean. Maybe if you want to drop a link or something, because I mean, I'm perfectly open. If people can give me examples of Jewish students being assaulted, then they're more than welcome. I will read them on stream. I'm not afraid of my views being challenged in any way. It's just that, like, my impression as somebody who has looked at this with a fairly close eye since it started, I just have not really seen anything of that nature. TLDR, the left is unironically evil. Well, it's a case of there is no such thing as bad tactics, there are only bad targets. And I'm reading this book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, and yeah, it really makes you question why the Rockefellers gave John Dewey a completely blank check to reform the American education system from the ground up. It really makes you think. You start noticing things very, very rapidly. And it's getting frustrating, because the thing that I've noticed most of all is basically the hypocrisy of people who claimed that they were on the side of free speech, that they were on the side of protesters, when it came to people like the Canadian truckers and various right-wing protests across America. And yet these very same people are, without the slightest bit of irony, without the slightest bit of self-reflection, are now turning around and basically going, yeah, we're perfectly okay with these exact same tactics if they're applied to people we don't like. Like, you don't understand us. They've almost literally come out and said, you don't understand. We didn't actually believe in free speech. We believed in speech for us. But we are perfectly fine with the taking away of speech from people we don't like. It's something that I vented to about with my friends quite a bit, and I felt that I needed to just air it out. And I'm glad that people haven't instantly jumped down my throat from bringing it out. And it applies just as much to the TikTok ban, too. I have had so many people say to me, we should definitely ban TikTok because it's foreign propaganda. And my reaction is, we're still allowed to read Osama bin Laden's letter to the US that he wrote for why he did 9/11. We're still allowed to view North Korean websites. We're still allowed to look at Russian material on the internet for the most part. Why is it that China is a unique evil? Think about it for a second. I want people to use a tiny bit of critical thinking skills, because people have this dreadful problem of being incapable of separating their emotions from their critical thinking. And people just won't accept that. It is an unpleasant thing for them to hear. and I'm tired of sugarcoating it for people. No, they can protest all they want, but you cannot infringe on others' rights while doing so. Yes, and that should be an equal standard for all. People should all have the same rights and freedoms. It's just like the person who is found over the dead body of their murder victim, clutching the bloody knife, has the same right to be considered innocent until proven guilty as anyone else. Because think of the children, Proctor. I think of the children all the time. And you know what I think when I also think of the children? I think of the parents too. If you have spent decades... But what if I want it banned because it's actually bad for people's attention span? Again, parents should take more active roles in their children's lives. If a parent allows their child to be exposed during formative parts of their life to things that are unobjective, negative to their condition, then it's the parent's fault. The establishment doesn't want us reading things that challenge their narrative. It's why they don't want us reading fascist literature, because the fascists were socialists and were open about it. I completely agree. Yes, Monarchical Foreigner says, sugar is bad for you, should we ban it completely? I mean, I will say, I am not going to say that I am a complete, like, how do you even pronounce it? Like, laissez-faire capitalist in all of this either. I do think that there are some things that should be restricted based on the fact... Stop thinking of the children, Proctor the Twin. I think of the parents. I'm more into older women, okay? We like older women on this channel. I'm glad I could get that off my chest. I really am glad that I could get off my chest. There's a couple of other funny things that I wanted to go over now that we've done the major stuff. In fact, so that it doesn't seem like I'm a Palestine simp, there was this one thing from the Daily Mail that I looked up that I think would be a nice juxtaposition to showcase that I'm not 100% on the side of the protesters or anything like this. Because this, I thought... was, well, do I even need to describe it? Then you have to take into account as to how many people can actually afford to take care and pay attention to their children. Yes, I agree. That's where the rabbit hole goes a bit deeper. Stop liking older women, Proctor the Discord. Look, I like women, okay? I like women. Crossdresser makes children chant Free Palestine during reading session at Massachusetts Arts Center, even though Hamas tortures gays. I wonder if I can play this video.
Today what we're going to do is we're going to shout, Free Palestine. Can I hear that?
Free Palestine!
It's quite
If
loud.
you're a drag queen and you know it, shout,
Free Palestine!
If you're a drag queen and you know it and you really want to show it, you're a drag queen and you know it, shout,
Free Palestine!
I actually am. I have dentures on, but you can't tell.
Oh, multiple.
It's okay. Or one or two or three. It's okay to need some help. It's okay to need some help. Every now and then we need a little help, don't we? I know, it's true. It's okay to have a different nose. A big long pink nose, don't you think? Oh, it's okay to be a different color. We're all different colors. That's what's so great about it. We are the rainbow. And we all have different colors.
You know, it's at times like this that I think maybe Baal worship wasn't all that bad, because at least the priests of Baal were honest about wanting to burn firstborn sons on the fires of their altar, on the altars of their god to bring back the harvest, okay? Like, at least they wouldn't lie to you. They wouldn't pretend that they were doing nice things to your children. They were honest and saying, yeah, you've got to chuck your children into the fire to guarantee a good harvest. And I still have people tell me Drag Queen Story Hour is a far-right conspiracy theory. I dropped a link for the eye stabbing in the Discord. Thank you, Muffy Graves. I will look at that in just a moment or two. Let me just look at my stream settings for just 1 second. Stream health is good. It seems like... Has anybody else had any problems with my stream so far? Because my stream health seems to be good at the moment. Leftists try and push their ideology on children because most children just accept whatever adults tell them uncritically, and leftist ideology can't stand up to critical thinking. Proctor, I might have something for you. Just DMs, though. Okay, you're feel free to send those to me, of course, Moaoko. A drag queen was recorded ordering children to chant Free Palestine during a queer storytime event at a Massachusetts art center. Performer Little Miss Hot Mess read stories to kids during the Queer Storytime for Palestine event at Northampton Center for the Arts on April 14th. The event, organized by Valley Families for Palestine, was intended for preschoolers through upper elementary school age children. Little Miss Hot Mess wore a sparkly red dress, green boa, and a large watermelon-shaped brooch while reading her book If You're a Drag Queen and You Know It. If you're a drag queen and you know it, shout Free Palestine, the drag queen said. The event included dancing, celebrating Palestine... Celebrating Palestine culture, yes. A drag queen story time. Celebrating Palestinian culture. Yes. The homosexual Palestinians certainly do have a rich culture that they love to share very much in public, very flamboyantly within the borders of Palestine. That's definitely a thing that happens an awful lot. Little Miss Hot Mess shared photos from the reading on her Instagram with the caption, "Last weekend, I had the honor of taking part in a queer story time for Palestine." Authors Hannah Moshabek, a second-generation Palestinian American, and Sarah Prager. Wait, please don't tell me. Please don't tell me. Give me just 1 second. Give me just 1 second, please. A Jewish... The meaning of Prager: 1. German or Jewish Ashkenazic surname. I'm noticing, chat. I'm noticing. I'm noticing. Oh my goodness. I needed this palate cleanser after all the nonsense, after all the political nonsense and passion I just got into. Every single time. Every single time, ladies and gentlemen. The event was both a wonderful reminder of the power of imagination, community, and organizing, while at the same time heartbreaking in thinking about how we could feel so much joy together while Gazans are suffering. Still, I hold out hope in working with children to bring about a just, present, and liberatory future. Moshabek commented on the drag queen's post. It was such an honor and joy to present with you. Thank you for coming to Northampton. My daughter is still talking about the event and asking some great questions and using her voice. Thank you for coming to Western MA and showing my children and their friends and community what it means to stand up for one another, says Jill Breivik. The event organizer, Valley Families for Palestine, said, "We come together today in joy and solidarity and learned some important lessons about being ourselves, using our voices to speak out against injustice, and being fabulous while we do it." Others slammed the event, saying queer pro-Palestinian supporters would be treated horribly by Hamas. This is insane, and don't get me started about the irony of you defending your potential attacker if you were to visit in Gaza, says Nama Katoa. Why am I not surprised that the people calling this out all have very distinct foreign names? Queers for Palestine events and marches have been criticized as a misguided show of support for a regime that does not support gay rights. The Islamic Middle Eastern state follows Sharia law, and as noted by Amnesty International, it is not safe for the queer community. Palestine is the 6th worst country in the world for legal rights and freedoms LGBTQ people have, ranking 192nd out of 197 countries, according to Equalidex's LGBTQ Equality Index. A Hamas terrorist commander, Mahmoud Ishtiwi, he's apparently a character from Toho, was tortured and killed by the organization in 2016 for allegedly having sex with another man. Ahmad Abi Marhia, a 25-year-old gay Palestinian, was found beheaded after receiving death threats because of his sexual identity. Mickey Zakharov was not in my bingo card. I don't want to think of these blokes presenting to kids. Stop talking like a femboy, Proctor. Think of the Foxes. And they say Jewish comedy is dead. Sorry, give me just 1 second to read this thing. Okay, that's very interesting. I will definitely look at that more after stream. Sorry, I was just sent something quite interesting, but it's not something that I really can talk about on stream because it is mostly private information. I do hate the Daily Mail. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this website. The Daily Mail's website is the worst thing in the entire universe, bar none. But I do like the Daily Mail because they produce some fascinating content that is very fun to read. I had another Daily Mail article, actually. Middle schoolers study in fear after being forced back to class with troubled trans kid who named 45 on hit list. Boston parent says they know the school is not protecting them. Well, yeah, it's Boston. A whistleblower has come forward about the terror at a Massachusetts school after woke teachers let a troubled trans kid return to class after naming 45 fellow students on a menacing hit list. The parent of a child at Waterton Middle School in the West Boston suburbs told DailyMail.com that students now fear for their lives, worried each day that they'll be going home in a body bag. Worse still, says the scared parent, school officials have silenced criticism of the trans 7th grader. What a shock. Parents say they cannot talk about school safety without being accused of transphobic wrongthink. I am a British person, so I actually don't know what the American school grading system is. What age is a 7th grader? Is it like 14, 15? I'm not sure. The kid with a 40-person hit squad Oh dear. Oh. Leftists wouldn't know consistency if it walked up and slapped them in the face. George Takei simps for the exact same political party that sent him to a concentration camp. We're raising an entire generation of Pavlik Morozovs. It is very, very much unpleasant to think about for any length of time. Students on the hit list have prepared to fight for their lives if they need to. They know the school is not protecting them. Matthew McCarthy, I've got Jews on the brain. A school spokesman says there have been no instances since the hit list was uncovered in January, but he declined to comment on the whistleblower allegations. The case spotlights wider fears in US classrooms about the rising number of students who identify as trans and non-binary who face bullying, and the small but worrying number of them who embrace violence. The crisis began in January when a teacher overheard students discussing who had been named on the hit list. A search of the trans student's Chromebook, of course they use a Chromebook, revealed the document, which was entitled Hit List. The school alerted the police and interviewed the student. They found they did not have access to weapons and there was no credible threat to the safety at the 560-student grades 6 to 8 school, official emails show. The list-writing student and their gender identity has not been revealed. The whistleblower parent says they are physically big for a 7th grader, definitely bigger than the majority of students in the school. In other words, it's a male to female, adding that this has a bearing on the potential of a physical attack. School council member Lily Raymond Reed called for empathy for the creator of the hit list, and of course, it's a woman. Is this superintendent? Is that main superintendent? That's supped. Superintendent Dean Galston arranged for a re-entry process to return the student to class. Officials spoke of the need to tackle anti-trans and other biased behavior in classrooms, to have empathy for the creator of the list, and for the immediate creation and of an affinity space for for rainbow families. At a school forum, Gladson criticized worried parents for student shaming. This ultra-progressive approach did not wash with some parents, including the whistleblower. Parents are scared, worn down, and disgusted. So many have had their trust in Waterton schools shattered, they told DailyMail.com. It's horrible to learn that your child has been put on a list by another student, but to then have your concerns ignored, have administrators deceive the greater community, and have the needs of the perpetrator be so blatantly put over the needs of the victims takes things to a whole other level that it's overwhelming. Parents of school kids cannot speak out of fear of being politically incorrect, said the whistleblower. They don't want to look anti-trans. There are people in school leadership who can't or won't differentiate between legitimate concern about the actions of a trans person and a general attack on all trans people. Whoever said this is very intelligent. Well, at least fractionally more intelligent than the average, which is not hard at all. Parents are generally accepting and supportive of trans people in the liberal-leaning suburbs, just a few miles west of Harvard University, the whistleblower said. Has anyone noticed how all of these things tend to take place at very left-leaning institutions? You almost never hear about a hard right school where a trans person went crazy and attacked somebody. How fascinating that is. How fascinating that, like, hard right schools, like hard right educational institutions, seemingly don't have a problem with all of this trans violence. And yet all of the highly accepting places with high numbers of rainbow accepting parents are producing children who seem to be pathologically violent and aggressive. Not the kind of Rayman sequel I wanted. Pathological altruism. Woke white women physiognomy. I've got Jews on the brain. Proctor Zakharov, 2024. 7th grader will be 11 to 12. Blimey. It's so demoralizing, and it's hard to put it into words. Parents' worries were brushed aside. Of course, they're parents. They treated parents' justifiable concerns for their children's safety as obstacles to be managed and marginalized. Their detachment from reality and lack of genuine empathy has created a more dangerous situation for everyone in the school. School spokesperson McCarthy declined to comment on the whistleblower's claims. We will address any concerns parents have on an individual basis and will offer no additional public comment in response to this one parent. In previous emails, he referred to questions about whether staff acted properly or improperly, or were striking the right balance or the wrong balance over classroom safety. There have been no incidents since January, and this matter has been closed since then, he added. Watertown's classroom debacle was uncovered by a public records request to see school emails, made by the Parents Defending Education, a conservative investigatory group. How long is it? No, it's only a few minutes more. PDE researcher Casey Ryan said too many schools prioritize political correctness over safety and transparency. The lives of both staff and students are at serious risk in these situations, and schools have a responsibility to provide a safe environment that keeps parents appraised of any threats, said Ryan. Watertown broke that trust with parents when district administrators chose the comfort of a student who needs real help rather than the lives of those impacted by their students' actions. The revelations come amid growing fears about trans violence in America's classrooms, overwhelmingly left-leaning classrooms. Good grief. Pembroke Middle School in Pennsylvania is reeling this week after a 13-year-old trans student used a metal Stanley mug to violently beat a fellow 12-year-old student in the head until blood spurted out. Transgender 28-year-old Aubrey Hale last year killed 3 children and 3 adults at her former school in Nashville, Tennessee. A legal battle to release her suicide note and other writings has yet to be fully resolved. Campaigners say that schools have a duty to help trans students by affirming their identity changes and tackling bullying. Conservatives warn of a fad of and soy schools. I and say, oh, that's just a typo. Good grief, Daily Mail. Are you serious? Should stick to teaching kids how to read and write. They should. On this front line in America's culture wars, parents, students, and teachers have to make tough calls about rising rates of transgenderism, mental health issues, peer pressure, bullying, and if affirmation on demand is always the best answer. Spoiler warning, it isn't. Of course, as soon as one of you does something, suddenly you're all about individual basis. Yeah, exactly. It's a very blatant double standard. Now then, let me just look at what was sent to me in... Yeah, this was something that Muffy sent. Will this open properly? Give me 1 second, please. Is this on the screen properly? Yes, it is. Good. Oh, is this... No, that's a different thing. Oh, sorry, just 1 second. I have to drink water. A Jewish Yale University student journalist reporting on an anti-Israeli protest at the Ivy League school Saturday night was stabbed in the eye with a Palestinian flag while her assailant has gone unpunished. Sehar Tartek, editor-in-chief of the Yale Free Press, was covering the protest, which saw hundreds of students camping on the campus grounds in support of Palestinians, when she was suddenly surrounded by demonstrators. Tartak said she and a friend were singled out for wearing Hasidic Jewish attire as the crowd formed a blockade around them to interfere with their filming. There's hundreds of people taunting me and waving the middle finger at me, and then this person waves a Palestinian flag in my face and jabs it in my eye, Tartak told the Post. When I tried to yell and go after him, I mean... Pro for this person. If she actually responded to being stabbed in the eye by yelling and going after her assailant, fair props to this person. That's a lot of backbone. Tartak, who was shopping for an eye patch when speaking with the Post, said she tried to report the assault to campus police, but they told her there was nothing they could do. Instead, she just got an ambulance ride to the hospital to get her eye checked out. Tartak slammed the university for not cracking down on Saturday's protest, the latest incident at Yale, where protesters have blocked entrances to school buildings as they condemn the war in the Gaza Strip. Stop Anti-Semitism, a non-profit watchdog group, has shared an image Tartak took of the protester who stabbed her in the eye, asking the public to help identify him. Yale Jews for Ceasefire, one of the groups who organized the protest, said they apologize for the incident and are working to keep the demonstration non-violent while welcoming Jewish voices to the discussion. Protest is hard, it inspires, creates power, and spurs us into action. At the same time, it is messy, divisive, and can develop beyond our control, the group said in the Post. We are all attempting to learn as we go, and sometimes we fall short. But are they going out of their way to actually find the person who committed physical assault to somebody and give them up to campus security? The group added that future demonstrations will involve more marshals who are specifically trained to de-escalate conflict as the protest in the university continues. Yale officials said the university's police department is investigating the assault and that the school tolerates no violence on its campus. How long is this article? It's just a few more lines. University President Peter Salovey echoed the sentiment in a statement Sunday about the protest. I am aware of reports of egregious behavior such as intimidation and harassment, pushing those in crowds, removal of the plaza flag, and other harmful acts. Yale does not tolerate actions, including remarks that threaten, harass, or intimidate members of the university's Jewish, Muslim, or other communities. The Yale Police Department is investigating each report, and we will take action when appropriate, including making referrals for student discipline. Let me just look back at chat. I'll send you more on both sides when I can. I'm doing the dishes. NEXAS is the green parrot. Fucks accelerate. Okay. It's incredible to see what people are willing to do when they think there's no chance they'll be shot for doing it. I agree, honestly. An armed society is a polite society. Along with Saturday's violence, students are holding a hunger strike on campus to push Yale to divest from weapons manufacturers affiliated with Israel, an effort that has been going on for more than 6 days. The hunger strike saw drag performer Tifa Wine join students on Friday as she slammed the university for its alleged support of Israel. Wait, drag performer she but failing to mention Hamas's record as an Islamic fundamentalist organization. Blah, blah, blah. Why is this using the she, her pronouns for a drag performer? You can't perform drag if you're a woman. Drag is specifically the act of a man dressing up as a woman. Your pronouns by default are he, him if you are a drag performer, because if they were she, her, you wouldn't be a drag performer. I don't get this. Like, you're willing to come out and say that Hamas oppresses LGBTQ people, and you're willing to point out the hypocrisy of these people, but you're also saying this drag performer is a she, her. Make it make sense. It just doesn't make sense to me at all. Have I missed any of the commentary on this? You already mentioned that 7th grader, 11 to 12. Oh, blimey, I'm actually getting boiling hot. Please give me a second. I need to take off my top. I have a white sister and live with her for uni, and I have to bear with effing Drag Race in the background 24/7. It's she, her. They call drag queens she, her. Guys, I'm really starting to get annoyed with all of this nonsense. I really am. But anyway, in case you were thinking I was going a little bit too leftist with my whole conversation about the Columbia University protests, again, I think that under no circumstances should the man who stabbed somebody in the eye be allowed to get away from it. I think that a protest loses the vast majority of its legitimacy the moment members within the protest cover up any crimes that members of the protest commit. If you want your... and this is what... because... like, my perspective on the whole Gaza situation is that Israel is very, very blatantly trying to destroy as much of Gaza's infrastructure as possible at the absolute bare minimum. I would say there is a very, very credible case that Israel is trying to commit genocide in Gaza. The stuff that I have seen coming out of Gaza is... it would be traumatizing if I wasn't already used to it. It's not the kind of thing that I would show to my parents because they are too... they would not be able to handle it. According to studies performed, the right wing outnumbers the left by more than 3 to 1. That's interesting. The left is desperate to try and cover up for the fact that they're actually an extreme minority in the United States. They want to make as many people LGBT as possible to bolster their numbers. That is very true. Very true. But I have an immense amount of sympathy for the Gazan people, because Hamas is most definitely a violent terrorist organization. If the situation was hopeless, their propaganda wouldn't be necessary. That's another very good point, Monarch Foreigner. But 40% of Gaza's... no, more than 40%, I think something like 60% of Gaza's entire population was born and grew up under a non-democratic state in Gaza, where Hamas controlled everything. They have never known a life without Hamas, and they have never had the opportunity to peacefully depose Hamas or institute any kind of government that is not directly ruled over by Hamas. The Gazan people are also, in fact, one of the more highly educated parts of the Middle East when it comes to Muslims. And also, Gaza is a surprisingly egalitarian and multicultural place. There are actually hundreds of thousands of Christians living in Gaza, or at least there were. There are hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Christians. And what I really despise seeing happen is lots of people are buying into the idea that Gaza is this horrible place of extremist activity where it is intensely regressive, whereas Gaza, in terms of what it's like as a Palestinian state, is one of the most liberal parts of all of the Middle East. It has absolutely nothing compared. It's much more egalitarian than places like the United Arab Emirates or Jordan or any of these other places. And as I said, there are Christian temples, Christian churches rather, in Gaza. So it distresses me when I see people say things like, "Oh, the Gazans are all terrorists and they should all be slaughtered. I don't care if they're killed because they're worse than the Israelis." Which I think just defeats a central point of what it is to be a good and understanding person. You can't simply judge large groups of other people. You can acknowledge trends in other people. For example, the whole 13% meme. You can look at people's backgrounds and you can make a judgment on what they are likely to act like based on their upbringing, because that is a rational and sensible thing to do. But when you cross the line when you instinctively start to associate certain people with an idea and a concept that individually may not apply to them. The governments of Gaza and Israel are both horrid and are more than willing to take it out on the populations of the other. Yes. I mean, Gaza is described as an open-air prison, which I agree with. And also, groups like Egypt, for example, hold a great deal of guilt in Gaza too, because Egypt has a hard border with Gaza. Although they are fellow Muslims, although Egypt is a majority Muslim country, they do not want anything to do with the Gazan Muslims. And it's why I hate it when people say that Muslims are all homogenous, because there are vast differences between even individual countries of the Muslim denominations. Do you think the Israelis will spare the people taking sanctuary in the Christian temples, or will they go full the patriot on their asses? I don't think they care. I mean, the thing about Israel is that Israel has the Hannibal doctrine, where they say, in fact, it's very interesting to look at the statistics that were put out by the Israelis just after the attacks by Hamas on October 7th, because Israel has been repeatedly forced to decrease the number of casualties that Hamas inflicted, that they are willing to confirm Hamas inflicted upon Israel. And they have constantly been revising up the number of casualties that were inflicted upon Israeli citizens by the Israeli armed forces themselves. And that is because the Israelis have the Hannibal doctrine, and the Hannibal doctrine is basically, if an Israeli soldier or civilian is captured by the enemy, in order to prevent that person from becoming a hostage, the Israeli military will shoot to kill those hostages. And there are many, many Israeli hostages who have been killed by the Israeli armed forces. And also remember things like the USS Liberty. They would never exaggerate their numbers. No way. Oh dear. It just we won't go too deep into that, but this has all taught me very much to be cautious of the narratives that have been going on. I think that October 7th was the most important wake-up call of my entire life, because it disabused me of many notions, and it made me pull in a lot tighter to my Christian roots and my Christian beliefs, because in those I have a level of moral certainty. And it's made the closeness of my community much more apparent to me and much more important to me, because it's brought home to me the fact that you can't trust large-scale institutions, be they government or anything else. What you can trust are the people around you, the people that you can personally believe in, who have shared your experiences, who have shared your background, who are part of your tribe. And one of the worst things that is happening in the world today is the atomization of the concept of the tribe. A lot of people, even in this chat, have said to me before, I would love to have more close connections with the people around me, but I live in a 40-story high-rise, and everybody around me is a drug addict or is a bum. And that is a tragedy. That is a true tragedy on every level to me. I think that in another one of my streams soon, I will talk about the importance of third spaces for a bit. Because third spaces have been critical to me in the past couple of years. The lack of third spaces, I think, is a terrible thing. Magdalenus Rex, Christianity is the only answer. What I hate is now people stupidly think Moustache Man's hodgepodge ideology has merit when it doesn't. Christ the answer, everything went to crap when we left him. I mean, I would agree with you. Again, there is a reason why I have drawn so much closer to my Christian community in real life since October 7th showed me just how intensely hypocritical so many figures in the broader Christian movement have been, and also how many people who have said, oh, I believe in Christian values, I'm just not overtly religious. They've been complete hypocrites and proven to be complete hypocrites multiple times. I'm never going to trust them in my entire life. Personal morality is the most important thing any person can have, because it's what separates you from an animal. And that, honestly, we're coming up to 2 hours now. I'm actually starting to get extremely overheated for some reason. I'm starting to sweat quite badly. I think I need something more to eat, actually. I haven't really had much to eat at all today. And so, to be honest, I think I'm going to end things here, more or less, because I've covered most of the stuff that I wanted to cover. I used to be Catholic, but they were shady. Yes, I have never been a Catholic. I never will be. Not a Baptist, not a Catholic. And that's all I'll say on the matter for now. Maybe one day I'll talk about it in more depth, but now is not that day, especially when I'm feeling kind of shaky and very hungry and also a bit too overheated. I know this wasn't a normal stream for me. I mean, I would definitely pick Jesus over, well, you know, there's commentary that I could make on that, but again, we're up to 2 hours now, and I know this wasn't a normal stream. I do appreciate very much the people that stuck with me during the early parts of this stream when I had internet issues for whatever reason. I was 6 years old when my eyes were opened to how effed up the world is. I'm very sorry that happened. I know that it's very unpleasant. So I'm going to leave things here, and I'm going to end stream now, and I'm going to go get myself something to eat and drink. I'm so grateful for everybody that bothers to show up for these streams, because you really let me air out my grievances with the world and also feel as if I'm accomplishing at least a tiny thing. I've had fun on this stream. I'm very grateful, Miles Edgelord. I appreciate everybody who chats in my stream too, that gives me stuff to talk about, because I don't want to pontificate towards people. I know that I'm very passionate about all the stuff that I talk about, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. I'm very open to other points of view, if they're not Dazzle. I find Dazzle very irritating. So please, if you want to disagree with me on anything that I talk about, if you want to dispute with me, if you want to bring up alternative sources, I'm very happy to listen to your voices. I'm very happy to entertain your views, and I'm very happy to view your arguments. Because without argumentation, there is no solidarity, because ideas are drawn out and tested on their merits. And if I get something wrong, and I'm not challenged on it, but I'm allowed to continue in the idea that I'm right, then I will just fall all the harder when I'm confronted with a problem that exposes my mistake for what it is. You should talk about China sometime. I absolutely should talk about China, actually. I haven't talked about China in a while, but I think that China is most definitely a group, a nation that is worth discussing extensively. But that's all going to be for next stream. In fact, I can see my internet is starting to drop out as well a little bit. So I will say goodnight to everyone, and I will end things here. Thank you all for coming, and good night. Streams like this are fun to listen to for big and small ideas to chew on. Thank you very much, Miles Edgelord. No justice, no peace, no tilde. No, that we are never. Dazzle is denied equal rights. He will be my one thing of hypocrisy. No equal rights for Dazzle. Good night, everybody. That's how I end.